Welcome, and thank you for joining the NEHA National Webinar Series. This is the third installment of our four-part leadership series, The Hard Fact of Soft Skills. This session will feature an amazing three-person panel discussing different aspects on social and emotional intelligence, essential skills for managing yourself and working with others. I'm Christy Denbrack, Chief Learning Officer at NEHA, and joining us today are Lisa Van Ramduck, MSW, MPH, Executive Director of the School of Public Affairs, the University of Colorado, Denver, Sarah Roberts, MHA, PCC, Chief Executive Officer of Clarity Matters Consulting, LLC, and Beth Rome, M.A., ACC, founder of Switchback Institute. And as you noticed, I went over their bios quickly because I did not want to eat up our time together by going through their full bios. They will be dropped in the chat for you to be able to read. And now we will go into this very exciting topic. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat box and we will address them at the end of their presentations. If you are not a NEHA member and you enjoyed this session, we invite you to become one at neha.org. Ladies, we have so much to cover today. Let's just start. So Lisa, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. Thanks, Christy. So welcome, everyone. Lisa Van Ramduck, happy to be here with you and these my esteemed colleagues who all really enjoy talking about, thinking about, and helping others think about emotional and social intelligence. Today, we hope that you maybe get a couple of new concepts that you haven't heard of before, that maybe you get a little deeper information and some concepts you are familiar with. And we're also hoping that you leave with some tools for your own skills in social and emotional intelligence. I'm going to start us with a little bit of a background of where did this concept of social and emotional intelligence come from. And part of the history really of it is this development through psychology and organizational development research in the 1980s. And during that time, we were seeing some broader worker and workplace changes, especially in the office workplace, a broadening view of effective leadership, certainly seeing a lot more women leaders in leadership, especially in the corporate space. And there became a recognition that this idea of intellectual intelligence as being the thing that equated to business and leadership success was not quite enough. And that there was something else here. And these researchers came to this idea of social and emotional intelligence. As you saw from the title of this series, that was termed at that time, and we still sort of use the word soft skills. And I think what Sarah, Beth, and I would all tell you, and what you might agree, is that these are some of the most difficult skills, the most challenging skills that we have to do in our workplace today. So we still use that term, but I think we all know it takes a lot of intentional practice. Now, what we did see in the mid-1990s is this sort of popularization of that original research with especially Daniel Goleman's 1995 book. He termed the concept of emotional intelligence, kind of pulling social and emotional intelligence together in one shorter term. There are many frameworks at this point and assessments in social and emotional intelligence, and the field does continue to evolve. So you'll hear some of us talk about some of these frameworks, and what I'll introduce you to here is just a very simple framework that Daniel Goleman uses that encompasses a lot of the other frameworks and research. So at its core, social and emotional intelligence is the ability to identify, assess, and control one's own emotions and identify and work with the emotions of others. EQ is a set of skills. So if you learn nothing else from today, know that this is a set of skills that anyone can learn. That includes your own self-awareness about emotions. It includes things like empathy. It includes flexibility, stress management. All of these things are skills that anyone can learn. But we do sometimes talk about, oh, so-and-so, this person that I work with has really high EQ. They're really great working with people. They seem to always be able to show up in the right space with the right sort of mentality and expression of things. They must have just gotten that naturally, right? And in some cases, that might be a little true. We'll talk about that in just a second. So why does all of this matter? Why does social and emotional intelligence matter? I think the first thing that we would say, and folks in organizational development across nonprofits, government, business would say, our complex environments and workplace cultures now include managing emotions and relationships more than ever, right? That's so much more of our work, especially in the public and environmental health space, requires collaboration, requires relationships with people that we may disagree with on other matters, but we need to work with. And that's the kind of space that emotional intelligence can be really important. I actually think emotional intelligence is also a really strong basis for equity and inclusive leadership. Those core skills of emotional intelligence bring you what you need at its core to be an inclusive leader. So this is a set of core leadership skills. There is research that indicates a strong predictor of performance in things like managing stress, collaborating with others, delivering feedback, coaching teams, and more. And then what we know from employers is that they are looking for these skills in the hiring process. And sometimes it might be a little difficult to line them out as bullet points in a job description, but interview questions and the sense that hiring committees have about an interviewee, they're definitely thinking about these types of skills. So let's get back to where do these things come from and how natural are they and how much do we have to practice them? So I've sort of built a wall here, our wall of social and emotional intelligence. And if we start at the bottom of that, there are some components about our own personalities and the ways that our brains are wired that might make us more skillful or less skillful in these social and emotional intelligence skills. We also know that a lot of how we're socialized and in the environment in which we're raised and practice, that gives us another set of skills in social and emotional intelligence. Some of us, especially women of my generation, were definitely more socialized towards empathy than some of my male colleagues during that sort of our generation of time. And so that is a component, both culturally as sort of a country and also in our smaller families and that sort of thing. Our families and community norms are also things that bring us social and emotional intelligence skills. Beyond that are the things that could be a little more personal to us. So our own self-awareness and the work that we do to understand those bricks below us. How did I grow up? Is there something that I need to flex, that I need to learn a little more? So I always joke, I'm a middle child born and raised in the Midwest. So when I think of the social and emotional intelligence skill of assertiveness, not really my place. But I've gained skills in that area, knowing that maybe my family, my cultural norms, and my socialization didn't give me those skills. I've worked on that. Social and emotional intelligence also increases naturally by age and experience. So the more experiences you have with yourself and others, the more it naturally grows. And then my favorite, and what I think the three of us work on, is these top two bricks, this intentional practice, recognizing those skills that you need to increase and the skills that you need to manage how you're using them, and then testing those in a variety of settings in order to expand the ways that you can use your skills. So the answer is yes, and yes, some of this is sort of wired a little bit, socialized maybe, and we can gain all of these skills. So I think the goal for using social and emotional intelligence skills is really finding the right skill in the right amount at the right time, in the right context, and being intentional with that and doing it with authenticity. So some of you all may be in the position where you have to present in a public meeting. It's not uncommon in the world of public health for us to have to present in public meetings. And so your emotional expression skill might be different when you're in that public meeting, even if you're having a hard conversation with community members about a tough situation in the community. You might reserve some of those emotional expression skills. It could be an intense, sad topic, and you're going to hold on to that and not express that because your intention is that space being for the public and the community and for them to share their needs and their emotions at that time. Now, my colleagues, Beth and Sarah, will tell you, you've got to figure out a time to deal with that emotion that you've had personally at a later time. I'll leave it to them. But this right skill, right amount, right time, right context with intentionality and with authenticity is what is the goal. So what are these skills? I mentioned we've got sort of these bigger categories that a lot of the frameworks fit into. The first one we think about is self-awareness. How do I understand the emotions that are happening in my own body? How do I understand how that shows up? Nervousness showing up as sweaty hands, upsetness showing up as a feeling of heat in my face and neck. How do I manage that? How do I control that, notice it, understand its impact on the situation, and then manage it in a way that's effective in the moment? How do I have broader social awareness of all of the emotions of other people in this space? And are they managing them well? Do we need to take a break because folks need a moment to engage in their own self-management? And then also that individual relationship management. So going one level deeper into these, that self-awareness, recognizing and understanding your own emotions, understanding when those are helpful for you, when they might be getting you stuck, all very contextual, as I mentioned in my example. And the area of self-management is not just regulating and managing those emotions effectively, but also staying resilient and adaptable in ongoing challenging situations, which again, my colleagues will talk a little bit about here. That empathy showing up in this area of social awareness. Empathy is a classic one that a lot of people think you either have it or you don't. Not true. You can overuse it if you have it, and you can get it if you feel like you don't. So lots of opportunity here. And then the idea that social awareness and understanding and recognizing emotions of others leads into stronger and better relationships. So using all of this social and emotional intelligence to communicate effectively, to lead, especially to resolve conflicts and to work through difficult situations. All right, that's the overview. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sarah, who's going to take us one level deeper and give us some tools for you.
Thank you, Lisa. So hopefully everyone can see my screen now. Technology is sometimes not my friend. Delighted to be here and really delighted to have an opportunity to reinforce and deepen what Lisa has said around the idea of self-awareness and self-management. And one of the things to consider here is that the foundation for how we work well and play with others, if you will, from the old kindergarten report cards, is really based on our own foundation of our comfort with our own social and emotional intelligence. So it begins with self. It means becoming aware of our own emotional triggers, identifying triggers, patterns, becoming aware of when have we noticed this in the past, and responses, and then learning how to manage and adapt to those responses with others in all situations. So it's one thing to say, yeah, I show up my best self when everyone's agreeing with me. However, when I run into situations perhaps where there are different thoughts, feelings about situations, that's where the emotional and excuse me, social and emotional self-management, excuse me, really comes into play. Sorry for that. And so how do you figure out, how do you discover awareness, and then what do you do with it? There's all sorts of self-assessment tools out there that can create awareness. And I'm just going to speak to the few that I work with. I can tell you that both Beth and Lisa work with some of these and work with others. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can contact any one of us after this session. What these have in common is that they measure our behaviors and they measure our unconscious biases. which is really a great thing because it can help bring that to the light. There are numerous ones out there, and to keep it simple, I'm going to just talk about 3 that I think have some commonalities and some differences as well. So the emotional intelligence 2.0 has an individual and then a 360, which if you're feeling brave, gathers information about how others perceive you. Beth's going to be talking to that part a little bit more. And it provides really complex and deep information, which quite frankly can be overwhelming for individuals who are striking out on this on their own. It is a scientifically validated tool. It requires a certified practitioner to administer and debrief the result, because it does give you a deep dive into your behaviors and your biases. Then I want to contrast that with DISC, which is a really common one that you may think, DISC, I didn't think of that as a self-assessment tool for emotional and social intelligence. It is. It's a high-level, user-friendly one that can really get people started. So both of these are great for different reasons. And then, as Lisa mentioned, the emotional intelligence has been evolving and growing since Daniel Goleman really put his stamp on it. And there is, in the last 4 or 5 years, this positive intelligence that you may be familiar with, that really talks about, okay, now that we understand what this is all about, how do we bring this in and really do something with it, which speaks to that self-management piece. So positive intelligence is actually an assessment with an operating system. It has an app to make it user-friendly. And what that does is that gives you these actionable physiological practices that help with the psychological to build your mental mindset. Whatever you choose, right, from these or others, the assessment is only as good as the actions that you take from the result. So first you want to create awareness, recognizing it all starts with you, and then it starts in the body where your emotions live. The second piece of this is really knowing yourself. Whether you choose to use the self-assessment tool or not, here are some questions that you can ask yourself to help you tap into and even deepen your emotional awareness and self-management. Check in on your beliefs. What is it that you believe in? What do you believe about yourself to be true? What do you believe about others? Where did this come from? How far in your background does this come from? Does this come from childhood? Does this come from the community that you grew up in? What are the biases that you perhaps didn't recognize that you're now becoming aware of? And what is coming up for you right now? What are you thinking or feeling? Are you noticing any tension in your body? Any physical sensations in your body? If so, what are those physiological responses saying to you? And have you been paying attention, or have you been just, pushing your way through things from a analytical standpoint and wondering why you're having trouble communicating your thoughts and feelings with others? What are you projecting? What is your facial expression? Lisa spoke to that a bit when you're in perhaps a meeting. Is your facial expression congruent with what it is that you want to be portraying and what's important to be portraying at that moment? Are you clenching your hands? Are you perspiring? What's happening? So these are all just great questions that can help you become more aware and deepen your understanding, including what is that response that you should be having in the moment, and how do you demonstrate that? So first, being aware of it so that you can then take action on it. I really love this wheel that Lindsay Brumman put together. It's an emotion sensation wheel. You may or may not be familiar with the feelings wheel. What I really like about this, other than it's pretty, is that it connects the sensations in the body with the emotion that you're feeling. And perhaps you've seen some of the Pixar movies around the emotions, which are really, really well done And we're doing, I think, a great job of getting that out to kids so that they can start identifying that they have feelings that go beyond anger, sadness, fear, happiness, right? And so for adults, and a wheel like this can be really helpful to give you the language of really what are you feeling. So for example, you could, I don't know if you can see this well enough, but you could take any one of these and you could dig down. So happy. So somebody might say, I feel happy. Okay, well, tell me more about that. You may discover that what they're really feeling is curious, that curious is a form of happiness. And then you can go down even further into that. Where are they feeling that in their body? Is it showing up as calmness? And as you get better and better at finding the language and creating the language, creating that awareness for yourself, it'll make it easier for you to be able to switch quickly, shift into the state that you want to be, so that you're actually showing up the way that you want to be showing up. Overall, whether we like it or not, it really is our responsibility as people working with people to be mindful and courageous in handling the things that we control, being aware of it and taking sometimes a vulnerable action to take control of it and to show up the way we want to show up. Being mindful and courageous in handling our response to things that we don't control, and we know there are many, many things we don't control. Managing our choices, managing our own personal energy, influencing those we are near, and then managing the chatter and sometimes the negative stories that live in our head. So let's talk about this big, beautiful brain here. We don't have time to go into, nor is this my expertise, to take a deep dive into neuroscience, although it is kind of a fun little hobby. What I want you to know is that emotional intelligence does live in our bodies, and our body includes our heads. So sometimes when we're talking about social and emotional intelligence, we think, okay, well, our analytical mind, our logical mind lives in our head, and the rest of it lives in the body. Nope, there's a whole area in our limbic system that is dedicated to our emotions, and that's our emotional center. It also happens to be the oldest part of the brain. So when we have these feelings and we have these beliefs, we have these emotions, and then the way that we act out on these emotions, and we wonder, how come I can't just will myself think my way out of it? It's because they've been there a long time. They may have been there since your childhood. For some of us, that's longer than others. It could even be from other generations before you, right? So there's a whole nother science on that. But what's important to know is that when people say things like, hey, I'm just going to change my habits, I'm just going to will myself, I'm just going to stop doing that, I'm going to will myself into whatever it is that I want to do, that's faulty reasoning, because a lot of it, much of it, lives in our emotional system, in our limbic system. And so it's important that you recognize this and you work on acknowledging what are those messages that you're getting from the amygdala in your limbic system, the part of your primitive brain that's there to warn you of danger. And are you paying attention to them? Because if you're pushing them away, it's like just keeping your hand on the hot stove. Ouch. So being aware of that emotion and behavior that threatens your success and doing nothing about it is like keeping your hand on the hot stove. I want to just introduce some discussion here around what we call saboteurs and sage. And the saboteurs and sage are really language from the positive intelligence that I mentioned on my original screen. Saboteurs are gremlins or negative thinking that we have in our brain that tells us that we've done something wrong, someone else has done something wrong, wrong. And then we throw in the judge, who then sometimes will say things to us like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you couldn't figure that out. What's wrong with you? And it creates this cycle where now we can't get out of it. And so to improve your social and emotional awareness and management, it's really about looking into what can I do to get into my body and relieve some of that pressure that I'm feeling in my nervous system, my psychological responses, so that I can more intelligently shift from these negative thought patterns that I've been carrying with myself into shifting into that self-management and showing up for other people with empathy, showing up with resilience, showing up in the way that makes people want to work with us. Some common saboteur perspectives. Sometimes I'll hear clients say to me, it's outside of my control. There's nothing I can do about it, right? So there's this external locus of control. And the reality is that, yes, while there are things that are happening outside of us, how we respond to them is really up to us. There's another one where people feel like if I just keep working on it, I'll be able to control the outcome. That's another saboteur perspective. And when I say that these are saboteur perspectives, what I mean is that they're telling us that we're not enough, that we're not doing it right, that we're at fault, someone else is at fault, or even that the circumstances are to be faulted. And sage perspective, in contrast, is identifying that, hey, I know most days it's going to be unpredictable, but when I train my thinking and I slow my reactions and I get into my body, I have choice. I can choose my responses to whatever pops up, and I can influence the outcomes. Some days that looks and feels easier and better, more eloquent, if you will, than others, but we're always in control. So it's that idea that whatever happens, I have control of it. I manage myself. Here are just some fun things that I think they're fun because they allow you to really ask yourself, okay, what's really happening here? So if you find yourself jumping to conclusions, slow down and look for the evidence. If you find yourself mind reading, ask yourself, what did I do? What did I ask for information? Did I express myself? Did I speak up? If you're looking and blaming yourself, you're looking outward, ask yourself, how did others and or their circumstances contribute, right? So lighten up on yourself, right? If you're looking and you're pointing the finger at them, ask yourself, how did I contribute? What's my role in it? And if it seems like everything's always against you, always, really look at what can you change and what is changeable behavior. And then when it seems like everything is against you, get specific. What specific areas of your life will be affected? And what are the specific behaviors that explain the situation? And the reason why that's important, of course, is because it'll help you uncover those unconscious biases. It'll help you understand things more clearly. And then in doing that, there's this wonderful practice called building your mindset muscles, where you can make yourself emotionally stronger and healthier. And you do that just like you would go to the gym and build up your physical muscles by, working your biceps or triceps. It takes practice, and with practice, you improve your self-awareness and your self-management in your daily life. And what I like about these exercises is that for working professionals, they're discreet. You can do them at your desk. They can last anywhere from 30 seconds to 12 minutes based on your schedule. And then as you do these throughout the day, you do them when you're feeling tense, you do them when you're feeling calm. As you're doing them throughout the day, you're actually building up your mental mindset and your ability to shift more quickly from that saboteur over to that sage thinking, so that you're no longer keeping your hand on the hot stove and you're able to move into quick, intelligent, social, intelligent action. There are breathing exercises, there are tactile exercises, visual exercises, and auditory exercises. For the sake of time, a breathing exercise that I want to share with you very quickly is that you can simply, without changing your breathing, notice what's the temperature of air as it comes into your nose, what's the temperature of air as it goes out of your nose. A quick tactile exercise can be noticing all the ridges on your fingers. Tactile exercises can be feeling different textures in addition to the fingertip. Visual exercises can be really focusing in on something very clearly and really paying attention to colors, etc., and then kind of blurring out. And then auditory can be listening for noises, for listening for sounds far away and close to you. And as you do these things, what you're doing is you're training your brain to get into your body and give your physiological system a bit of a break. So 5 techniques and tools that I want to leave you with before I turn it over to Beth is consider a self-assessment tool and create a plan for yourself. Decide what saboteurs, what areas of your life you want to weaken, what areas of your life you want to improve. Take your hand off the hot stove, and you do that by checking your thinking to avoid for those common traps that we mentioned, that faulty thinking, and really getting in touch with what's happening in your body by checking in with your emotions and your physical sensations, doing that by practicing either centering or grounding throughout the day, doing that when it feels like that's really going to help you, and doing it maybe first thing in the morning to create a habit, and then building your mental muscles and celebrating that you are taking that opportunity to be vulnerable and to increase your learning and growth. So with that, I will hand it over to Beth.
Excellent. Okay. I'm hoping you can all see the social awareness and relationship management slide. All right, we're going to take it from here, and I'm going to ask you to just take a sec and consider, what are you seeing on the screen right now? What is it that you're looking at? And now what are you looking at? And now, what do you see? And I ask you these questions because so often we stand solidly on one color of this beach ball. And if we stand on the green stripe, let's say, everything we see is green. We are wearing green clothes. And when we open our drawer, we are writing with green pens. Our perspective is all around green. And we fail sometimes to take a tour of the other colors, or to engage with others who stand on the other colors, or to stand back long enough to really see, what is the big picture? What are we really looking at? And what are the decisions and the conversations we need to have around that? And so I invite you to think about what color you might be standing on the beach ball, and are you seeing the whole perspective? So in this section about social awareness and relationship management, we're going to look at 5 ways to enhance our SQ. We're going to look at the role that play plays in our creating of safety and the environment that we want to best maximize the outcomes that we have based on our relationship management. We're going to look at 3 methods of gaming and 2 great tools. So we look at the first way that we can maximize our social awareness. We look at encouraging vulnerability. And oftentimes we think about the fact that that means emotions. We're going to be emotionally vulnerable. But really what it is a sharing of information. It's really getting into what's the truth around what's going on for ourselves and others. And a lot of this research comes from military teams, but it's true of all of our organizational teams as well. So when you look at top teams, they share mistakes and they create a cascade of openness. Because when one person says, I blew it, I messed up on that, that gives others in your team and in your agency the ability to say the same. Wow, okay, yeah, and I did this, which caused this kind of mistake and these ongoing issues. So we want to make sure that we are creating the environment that supports safety and sharing of things that can be vulnerable. Say I screwed up. Don't avoid weaknesses, because when you embrace mistakes, you learn from them together. Look for the best possible solutions for the greater good, not necessarily win-win. When we go to a win-win scenario, we make other people feel probably better about themselves, but we may not get to the ground truth. What's the reality around this situation? And how do we make it the best for everyone? And we use warm candor, not brutal honesty. I'm sure some of you have been on the receiving end of brutal honesty, and that's not always a great place to be. And it certainly doesn't support safety. So how do we create then warm candor? Susan Scott wrote a great book called Fierce Conversations. And she says a fierce conversation is one in which we come out from behind ourselves into the conversation and make it real. So I challenge you to think about, what things do you stand behind instead of coming out and having authentic conversations? What's preventing us from doing that? And one of the things that there are 4 elements of creating the fierce conversation. And the first one is that we tackle the tough challenges. We look at the really hard stuff, not the stuff that's pleasant and easy to do. These conversations provoke learning. So when we come away from the conversation, we've changed somehow. We've learned something. We're going in a different direction, perhaps. The third element is interrogating reality. So if I asked y'all to go to a window, same window, and look out and say, what do you see? You would all come back with something different. And so interrogating reality is about putting all the perspectives that we have on the table together, really examining them. But the foundation and the protection in all of this is that when we have those fierce conversations and we're tackling those tough challenges, we're always doing it in the context of enriching the relationships that we have around us. So we always have to keep the relationship first, the situation second. Third element is getting curious. Did you know that 70 to 80% of kids' dialogue consists of questions? But by the time we're adults, only 15 to 25% of our dialogue consists of questions. And research shows that curiosity is actually associated with better physical and mental health. And fun note, people who ask more questions in speed dating are more likely to get a follow-up date. But I want you also to consider the last social event you went to, or the last networking event you went to. Did you spend more time asking questions of the person you were talking to and getting to know about them? Or did you spend more time talking about yourself? And it's always fascinating when my husband and I go out, to some event, we'll compare notes when we're coming home. And almost always we've gotten to know a whole lot of people, but we feel like very few people have actually gotten to know us. So take kind of a self-inventory. Are you asking questions? Are you still curious? The fourth is seeking diversity. And research, and this is not a surprise. I know that this is not a surprise, but diverse groups are collectively smarter than homogeneous groups. And when outsiders were brought into a group, the original group got smarter and produced new information they'd not thought of before. This was a research study, but I didn't put in the bullet point is the fact that that group that was brought in to the original group said nothing. They walked into the room, they sat down, and just their very presence caused the original group to come up with new ideas simply because they were thinking in different ways. So look for diversity in what you're doing. And then the last one is cultivate a learning culture. Learn from mistakes, capitalize on micro moments of failure. So when we talk about micro moments of failure, we're saying it hasn't blown into some big catastrophic issue. We're catching it on the front end and we're saying, oh, oops, was that a training issue or is that a problem with our process? Do we need to include some staff around this to determine what we need to do? So don't let it blow up. Utilize those small failures to really support the learning environment and create immediate positive methods for support. Do you need some mentoring around this? Are there coaching elements that could be helpful? Again, is it a systems issue? Just take a look at it and say, okay, how do we maximize this mistake for the greatest good? So going forward, we're doing it better than we've done before. My husband's organization has a saying that is know better, do better. Once you know what the problem is, you can correct it, but you've got to find it and you've got to be brave enough to look for it. So the 5 ways to boost social awareness is to encourage vulnerability, foster warm candor, get curious, seek diversity, and cultivate a learning culture. And now just a minute about play. And Sarah talked about the brain just a little bit. I'm going to add a different component of it, and I'm going to talk about play And when we play, we have fun. And when we have fun, our brain feels rewarded. And when our brain feels rewarded, there is a release of a chemical called dopamine. And dopamine has a number of really great benefits, but a couple of them are connection with each other. It feels good, so we want more of it. We become more expansive in our thinking. We become more creative. We're more problem solving. And because it feels so good, we repeat it. Now, I want you to think about a time maybe when you were in school and you were called on in class, and all of a sudden your mind went blank. And not only could you not come up with the answer, but you didn't know what class you were in. You didn't have a clue what the topic was. And had you been sitting there the whole time? Absolutely. But what happened? You got this flush of cortisol into your brain, which is stress-induced learning, which then narrowed your focus and made you forget the things that you were looking at. And so what you really want to do is encourage a play around initiatives or projects or whatever it is that you're doing. And play is practice for survival. So we actually are learning a great deal when we let down our sophistication and we just play. So we're going to move in now into how we incorporate play with 3 gaming strategies. And lest, you know, I don't want you to be sitting there going, play. We can't play in our environment. We're doing serious work. Got to keep serious. These gaming strategies are all military, and military has been incorporating play and gaming for decades. So I want to start with a fast fail. So the concept of fast fail is you're starting a project or you're starting an initiative and you target it and you try to cause it to fail. Because if it is not strong enough to withstand your targeted attacks, then you may be prone to escalating the amount of resources, time, money, energy, people to supporting something that you need to approach differently. So Google X uses this all the time as a means of addressing global solutions. Project Loon, I don't have time to go into it, but I would say you got to check out Project Loon. It's pretty amazing. And that was a project they tried to kill and couldn't. And they attacked their problems with unchecked optimism. We think we can solve this issue with enthusiastic skepticism. So again, it's all the mindset and the culture that you have created around the tools that you're using. The second one is brain trust. This is Pixar's tool of choice. Pixar assesses and improves its meetings using brain trusts. So everybody who's involved in putting that movie together comes together and picks it apart. And they know that that's a part of the process. So they come together and they give candid opinions about the details of their film. And the CEO of Pixar said, all our movies suck at first. The brain trust is where we figure out why they suck, and it's also where they start not to suck. But the reason the creators of these films can come together and do this is because that is the culture of their organization. They have actively put this in place as a piece of their process, and they know it's not personal. They know they're doing it to better the outcomes. And then the last one I want to share with you are red teams. And red teams are not, they're associated with brain trust, but they're different. And the red teams are actually teams that have expertise in a plan or project that's being put together, but they are not on the project team. So the project team puts a plan together, they hone it, they get it to the best version of itself that it can be. And then they call in the red teams. And the red team's sole purpose is to shoot holes in the plan and see if there are places of weaknesses that could be supported. So red teams ask good questions that slow us down, reveal our ignorance or blind spots around something, and they reveal that confirmation bias that we've been talking about, where a group comes together and goes, this is brilliant, we're brilliant. And they say, well, not quite so fast there. They teach us that asking good questions doesn't make us look bad. It actually strengthens us, and we surround ourselves with talented people who have different opinions. So I love working with red teams. Red teams are super fun. So all of these, there are actually, I mean, I just chose 3 that I thought we could fit into this time, but there are a ton of gaming strategies that we are happy to share with you. And then 2 great tools. One is emergenetics. Some of you might be familiar with this. I've worked with emergenetics for about a decade, and I can tell you it is by far the tool that I think for team development and really breaking down silos and creating a shared understanding around communication and conflict and all kinds of things. It's a brilliant tool. It is a great personal self-assessment, but it's brilliant when it talks about how you relate to the person that you were talking about and how to bridge differences that might occur and come to a common understanding. It's built on the wisdom of cognitive diversity, not differences, and embracing other perspectives. And then there are 7 attributes that it looks at, 4 thinking attributes, 3 behavioral attributes, and great tool. And then team emotional and social intelligence. So this is a TESI assessment. It's a team assessment, and all of the individuals take the assessment by themselves, but then there is a collective look at how do I show up relative to the opinions of my teammates for an overall team identity. So it looks at 7 elements: team identity, conflict resolution, motivation, communication, positive mood, emotional awareness, and stress tolerance. And again, this is a really great tool for looking at where are some shortcomings perhaps in your team's effectiveness. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. So in summary, 5 ways to enhance social awareness include encouraging vulnerability, fostering warm candor, getting curious, seeking diversity, and cultivating a learning environment. The 3 strategies for gaming that I presented were fail fast, brain trust, and red teams. And 2 tools are emergenetics and team emotional and social intelligence. But like Sarah and Lisa talked about earlier, there are a ton of great assessments. So if you have questions, feel free to contact us. And I want to leave you with this. Another quote from Susan Scott with First Conversations, and she says, while no single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a career, a company, a relationship, or a life, any single conversation can. So when you're thinking about your relationship management, when you're thinking about how you engage collectively and socially, be mindful of the conversations you have, because I guarantee that each one of you can think of several conversations that led you to where you are today that happened in the context of that, of your group, of your organization, or a past organization. And these are the 2 books there, and you will be receiving these. So these are the resources that we shared with you, or I shared with you. So with that, I am going to stop sharing.
That was incredible. I have written so many notes down myself of things I want to go back into, and listening to the 3 of you. Oh my gosh, so many stories of that's why that happened. That's why that failed. So I would like to ask a question. Actually, we're in a leadership and all staff retreat this week, and I would love to take some of this back to that. So we're talking about teamwork. And we were talking about what sabotages teamwork. And these 2 things seem to go seamlessly hand in hand. So some of the questions, first one I want to start with is, what if there's always seems to be someone who's afraid of conflict, who is afraid to speak up, afraid to say anything. And then there's the person that might have not handled the situation in the best way according to emotional intelligence. How does that person come back to correct that after the fact and not so much continue to push away the person who has a fear of conflict? So when you have 2 opposing sides, but it's the same coin, do you have any suggestions of what one or the other person might do in that situation?
I think we might all.
I think we all
I'm
do.
looking at you.
So I heard 2 different questions, kind of. One
Yes.
was, how do you hear the voice of the person who is afraid to speak up or afraid to put their opinion out on the table?
Yes.
And one of the tools that I love talking about is like the horseshoe approach, or specifically if you are in a group and you're all tossing ideas out and you know that there are some folks who are just, they're not there, they're not putting their voice out, hand out a note card. Take a minute, quiet the conversation and say, everybody in this moment, what's the most salient, what's the most important conversation or element of this conversation that you have heard. And we're going to take a minute, we're going to write it down, because that quiets that extroverted voice that may monopolize the space, and it gives voice to the people who don't push their way into the conversation. And then you can share those in a variety of ways. So that was the first one I heard about, or the first question I heard. And then conflict, I'm happy to toss the conflict question to one of you two if you'd rather answer it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to this knowing yourself, and then in a group of people who are working together in an ongoing way. And this goes a little bit maybe to Mary Beth's question too, is that being okay sharing that, right? I said, I'm a middle kid born and raised in the Midwest. Like, I'm really good at avoiding conflict, y'all. Like, really good. And I know that about myself, and I know that that's unhelpful. That is not a good way to be. I need to unlearn that, or I need to relearn how to be more effective in that. And I have a close colleague who is like born and raised in Boston. Like she like eats and breathes conflict for breakfast, right? Like it's how she engages with people. And it took us a while to figure out each other and to have an appreciation for what we both bring, and to notice when our way was not working for the other person, right? This is the know yourself, be willing to share a bit about yourself and where that comes from. So I get where that comes from with her. And when she comes at me with a thing and I'm feeling like kind of struck by that, I can still have an appreciation for who she is, and like that, that's where it's coming from. And I can take that moment for myself to say like, okay, I'm going to step into this in this moment and have a different kind of approach. A little harder when you're not consistently in communication with those folks, right? When it's just a smaller group that you're kind of in and out of, because you might not have the opportunity to build that relationship or even that knowledge about each other. And then I would say the last thing for me is creating a space. And I would say it's not just the leader's job, it's all of our jobs when we're in a space with others, to create a space where saying, oh my gosh, ouch, that hurt what you just did, and saying, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, is natural, right? It goes back to the kids question, right? It's like I bonked a kid, on the head, and then 2 seconds later we're hugging. We don't do that as adults, right? We walk away with grudges. And I think getting better at the oops, I'm sorry, and the ow, that hurt in a group can be helpful.
I have a great question that just came through the chat. So again, any one of you, all three of you jump in on this. This is great, especially for our memberships and our EH professionals. The question is, how and can and how does an environment of openness and warm candor apply in our relationship with those we are inspecting? So take a food restaurant inspector. How do you build that type of relationship? And you just said it, Lisa, of this might not be a full teamwork relationship. This is just a few hours in a year, maybe, of inspecting. So
I'm harkening back, Christy,
Yeah.
to my local governmental public health world from my most, my past career. And you've got to first recognize your power in that situation. You have the power to literally take away the livelihood of this person. And that, I know the environmental health inspectors that I work with hold that very dear and have a very open and education, and we're here to help you be amazing. We're not here to just pick. But that's not necessarily how you're perceived, right? So just owning the perception of your power in the space is the first thing that I think is important. And it often, as public servants, it's hard for us to grapple with that and own that. And I would love to hear, Sarah and Beth, what your thoughts are beyond that.
Yeah. So it really comes into, first identifying what's going on for you, right? Because if you're feeling warm candor, or if you're not, if you're feeling like this person, this facility has made a mistake before and you're having a hard time letting that go, you really need to be aware of that, and you need to do some work internally to get yourself into a place where you can be more objective. We have this contagion effect, these mirror neurons that happen, that when we show up, it goes to what Beth was saying about play. When we show up and we're all warm and, you know, everything's going great, people pick up on that. When we're tense, people pick up on that too. And so you can actually unknowingly activate someone's saboteurs, their judges. You can activate their sage, which it helps you make, you know, clear decisions. And so being aware of how you show up is and what that is doing to others is important as well.
We have one more question that just came in, and Beth, I'm going to direct it towards you.
Okay.
This question is, are there resources to help define ways to encourage warm candor in the workplace?
There are. First and foremost, I would recommend Fierce Conversations. It's a really great read around interpersonal conversations as well as organizational kind of perspectives. So that's one that I would highly recommend. But the Daniel Coyle book that I referenced is another one where they have very, very intentionally created the culture that they want. And has, you know, and that book is really great at examining what the elements are that go into creating the space, the environment, the conversations. One of the things we know is that culture happens, but great cultures are cultivated. They are absolutely designed for the outcomes you want. Not so great cultures happen just because you neglect them and you fail to put into place the things that are really important. And so I would, you know, so I would say both of the books that I referenced, but there's a great reading list, and I am happy to share that with you, Christy, and then we can, you know, you can send that out because there are a lot of things, and I'm sure Lisa and Sarah have, you know, they're probably sitting there going, yes, we have it too. So yeah, we can figure out how to support that.
Went so quickly. We are already out of time. We might have to come back and do a part 2 if you're willing to do that.
We'd love it. Yeah, we'd love it.
All
Perfect.
3 of you, Sarah, Beth, and Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and time with us. I would like to tell everyone to be sure to join us for part 4 of the 4-part series, where next Tuesday, same time, we'll be talking with Kathy Walker, who is a regional news director for iHeartRadio Medias in the Rocky Mountain region. She'll be talking about Meet the Media before your worst day. As well, I would encourage everyone to fill out the short survey that you'll receive after this, because your feedback is instrumental to us in allowing us to bring you the topics you need and to complete our mission to build, sustain, and empower an effective environmental workforce. Again, all 3 of you, thank you so much. This was a wonderful hour. It will be recorded, and we will be putting it up on our YouTube channel. So more information to come. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
Thank you.